Welcome to Walking the Way. We're still in Renovation of the Heart, Chapter 3. We're on question 2, which is, do you see how the ruin in question is the result of spiritual formation that people receive in the natural course of human life on earth? Well, obviously, yes. And the quote that I pulled for this one was right out of the gate, page 1. The most hardened criminal, as well as the most devout of human beings, have had a spiritual formation. And that's pretty kind of a horrifying thought, actually. The idea that spiritual formation isn't like an optional thing. It's a guarantee. It's an inescapable fact of reality that we have spirits and they are being formed by the world around us, by the things that we consume, the people that we interact with, the choices that we make and the actions that result from them. Frankly, an incomprehensible number of variables that are at play in the who that we become. And if you don't have a very clear picture of who you want to be when you grow up, it's very easy to just default into what the world puts into you, puts onto you. And that's why I think it's kind of crazy that Christian circles don't ask that question sort of into adolescence and early adulthood. Everyone asks that questions to elementary age kids, who do you want to be when you grow up? And usually the answer is a profession, which I think is an artifact of the cultural milieu in which we live. But that's a question that stops getting asked around, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13.
It stops getting asked around 12 or 13, and then it gets rephrased in high school to where you're going to go to college, basically, and what you're going to study. And it's just it's asking the same question in a different way, but it's still career focused, like you were saying. When you ask it to a kid, it's what do you want to be when you grow up? And you're asking what their dream job is, basically. And so that's when they're saying firefighter and such. And then when you ask it again, it's usually later on in life, like junior, senior year of high school. And then you're asking the same question, and the question's the same, but it's phrased differently, and the answer's more practical, but it's still the same realm of thought. It's just thinking career-wise, and it's not thinking the greater vision that you're pointing to.
Yeah,
Continue.
Which is there's what you do, which is very visible and easy to keep track of, really. And that's why a young child, when you ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, you would expect a pretty superficial answer. But it's actually as you would expect the answer to become more refined and sophisticated as we age, but it actually becomes less so. As you pointed out, it becomes more practical and grown up in the most horrible sense, where it's more focused on the outward doing and not even in an aspirational way. I'm an engineer. You shouldn't aspire to be an engineer. I'm just you just shouldn't. Yeah. And I think you would feel the same way about your career.
I'm a tax accountant. I chose it specifically for security and solely for security. There were no aspirations involved.
Right. And I think it's a tragedy. It's a shame that that's the case. And that is a pretty universal experience in at least the American system of what we'll call charitably education. And as I said in the last video, God's ambitions for us are way bigger than that. The idea that it should be considered ambitious to become a doctor is a bit silly. There's lots of doctors. There's only one version of you that lives forever in heaven, and that is a much higher calling, and it's one that even in Christian circles gets completely ignored. I have never once been asked, what do you think heaven, Ryan, looks like? What characterizes the eternal person that God wants you to be, that you in your heart of hearts want to become? We just don't ask that question. And that makes it completely impossible to pursue it. You can't hit a target that you don't even know exists, or you don't want to know where it is or what it looks like. And so any attempt to pursue righteousness in the ways that are particular to you and the giftings and callings and experiences that you've had on your life. It's just like the question doesn't even make sense. There's nothing to grip onto with it other than, don't hear me say this is like a lesser thing, but like the revealed will of God in the scripture. That takes us a long way, but it's not written for specific persons. Like there's no chapter like, hey Ryan, hey Dustin, these are the particular things that I have in my sovereignty and the perfection of my knowledge and will and goodness. This is what I've set out for you. These are the particular ways that you should go, the things that you should do, the skills and talents that you should develop and use for the advancement of my kingdom. That doesn't exist for anyone. And lacking a clear framework of curiosity about what those things are and how to develop them and employ them for your own good and the good of the people around you. Like you can't do that until those kinds of questions are asked. Which brings us back to the sort of ruin question. We don't have a clear direction to go. Just about anything seems okay. And the world, because it does usually have a pretty clear vision for everyone's life, as horrible and destructive as it may be, at least it's clear and easy to follow. And there's no sort of Christian equivalent of the American dream.
Yeah. So you were talking about there's no book or chapter where God's just outlining, okay, I want you to do exactly this. And our young adult pastor at our church likes to talk about how the Bible's not a checklist. And we can sometimes want it to be a checklist, but we shouldn't view it in that way. And I was going somewhere with that because you reminded me of Andy, and I can't remember where I was going with that. But the broader point, I agree with Ryan, but I think an important clarification is, like we talked about the lack of aspiration in our career choices. I don't think that's bad at all, but there should be aspiration when you're asking that question, when you're asked that question of what do you want to be when you grow up, or what do you want to do? There should be aspiration involved and wrapped up in that, even if it's not wrapped up in your career. And so it's not necessarily wrong to be more practical with your career, but you should be in that context understanding, okay, what does the ideal me that God has planned for me look like, and how do I get to that point, and what is that person doing once I get there? And
right.
It's a full vision of how do I get to A to B, and then once at B, what's the C that B is taking me to?
Yeah, what's life look like when you get there?
Right, yeah. And I don't think that we do that at all in the church. Like, I think that that's when parents and church mentors are asking you those questions, they should be doing so through a Christian worldview and not through the typical worldview of this kid is entering a transition in life. I'm going to ask him the typical question just to make conversation of, hey, where are you going to college? What are you going to do? And we in the church should be more specific in our language, or just have an understood. There should be an understanding there that that question implies more than just career. And so in my own personal life, I kind of, coming out of high school, had a broader vision aside from career. Like, largely the reason that I chose a very practical career that was stable is because I knew that whatever career I chose, it wasn't going to be especially fulfilling for me, or the ones that I did feel more fulfilling weren't going to support a family. And I knew that the most fulfilling thing for me was going to be supporting a family and raising a family. And the best impact that I could have on my community would be through a family of my own. So that was sort of my vision for myself. But I didn't express that to anyone. I wasn't really asked that by anyone. And that's a large part of the reason I would assume that I didn't have a practical set of steps for reaching my broader vision. I sort of just understood, okay, I'm pursuing this career, which is very practical and stable. I don't aspire for this career, but I have aspirations for other things that this career allows me to do. But I had a plan to get to the career, but not for anything else. And so I think sort of the broader point of where you started with this, Ryan, is just how important it is for the church to cultivate a desire for a vision of the future in young people, and then to help them actually plot that out, which our small group is actually doing somewhat now. And it's just on an individual basis, it's a good thing to think about, and would be a good thing for our viewers to think about, just the ideal self that you could be when aligned fully with God's will, and what that person would be doing and how you can get to that point.
Yeah.
Because again, like Ryan was saying, if you aren't doing that, you do have a soul, you do have a spirit, it is being spiritually formed. And so if you aren't taking it in a good direction and actively pursuing, okay, what is my best and how am I getting there, then you're either stagnant or you're walking backwards. And in the case of spiritual ruin and the actual question, that's walking backwards. And just when you don't have that vision and you're just living life, what you're taking in is spiritually forming you. And so if you aren't consciously aware of, okay, I want to be spiritually formed in this direction, then the world that you're living in is going to be what's spiritually forming you, and it's going to take you in the other direction.
An analogy I like to use is that everyone's a bodybuilder. Some people just have a very clear vision of what body they would like to build and a clear direction on how to do so. Other people just don't. Nonetheless, you got a body and you're building it. So the same for spirits. You've got one that's being formed. You can either choose the direction of its forming or just accept the reality that comes to you and the consequences that come with it. Banger.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Walk in the Way Book Club. Please like, comment, and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content. We can't wait to see you in the next one. God bless.